John Wick is probably one of the most intense and action-packed franchises in Hollywood, but what influenced it to be this realistic? Let's take a closer look to find out, starting with no CGI.
I know that the ones who love us will miss us.
Can you believe that? John Wick really was out there kicking butts and taking names without any visual effects in place. Now, that's definitely iconic, but this doesn't mean no practical or visual effects were used at all. You can't make a franchise this good without teasing some elements here and there. Like this blood splatter. You can't possibly believe that that's real blood or ketchup splattering about, right? Tell me you didn't. These guys would have to shower before every retake if that was the case. So, while special effects were used for bullet hits, explosions, and blood splatters, and some CG was used to augment reality and set up digital environments, the overall feel of the movies has been kept pretty grounded and close to reality. That's exactly what makes John Wick the real MVP in action heroes. What, don't believe me? Wait till you find out this insane info about his fight sequences that were inspired by real-life martial arts. Can you even imagine comparing this to a classic like John Wick? That's by far the worst fight sequence I've ever seen, and I've sat through Transporter 2. Guess the creators couldn't compare the two either, so to make sure Keanu Reeves didn't look as stupid as these guys while fighting in the film, they made sure that the fight sequences were as authentic as possible. Like in the first movie, they used a mix of moves the director, Chad Stahelski, calls Gun Fu, a fighting style that combines gunplay and martial arts, which is more extreme than the swordplay and combat styles used in the 80s and 90s by John Woo in Hong Kong. Then, in the second movie, John Wick uses Filipino martial arts moves to avoid being bladed. This style, known as arnis, involves Wick using a straight-bladed knife while his enemies use the infamous karambit dagger. Super cool, right? But then again, can we expect anything less from Keanu? He's literally an icon in a human's bodysuit. Did you know that he's done 90% of his own stunts in the film? And once, while shooting the iconic nightclub fight sequence, he was actually running a 104-degree fever. But according to the crew, he just kept giving take after take without stopping. What a man. Anyway, back to the topic. Where were we? Yes, the enemies. Did you know that they're even influenced by a real-life crime organization? Yeah, and they're known as the Ruska Roma. Building a criminal underworld that stands through multiple films is not easy, but the John Wick creators made sure they did it, and with a flair that no one can forget. Maybe that's why they used inspiration from a real-life clan to recreate this fictional one. The entire group is a reference to the massive Russian Romani clan that includes about 209,000 members, known as the Ruska Roma, or Russian Gypsies. They're a subgroup of Romani people living in Russia, Belarus, and they have a pretty dark background. You see, the Ruska Roma is a marginalized group to whom the Russian government refuses to even issue passports. Because of this, they live through terrible conditions, which are also shown in the John Wick universe. In the films, it's revealed that John's originally from the same clan, and that he was smuggled out by his adoptive mother, who is also the director of the clan. Just goes to show how much attention the creators paid to the details of the plot, making it another reason why I, and I'm sure you too, love the franchise. And speaking of details, there is one element in the movie that's built on some pretty realistic details, such as the Continental Hotel. I can't not talk about this one, because as the John Wick franchise has grown, so is this hotel. It's practically a character in itself right now, which makes it super important for us fans too. This safe haven for the film's assassins is a Flatiron-shaped building whose exterior is filmed at the Beaver Building at 1 Wall Street Court in New York City. Other areas of the hotel are shot at the Cunard Building, Hotel Walcott, the Rockefeller Center Roof Gardens, the Tao Downtown Nightclub, and the Jane Hotel. But that doesn't mean the hotel was inspired by these places. Sure, the facade may have been shot around these locations, but the hotel itself, with its one golden rule, is actually based on a totally different concept. Switzerland to be exact. The single rule that the hotel follows is no business on Continental's grounds. This means no killings allowed within the hotel, and that's based on the neutrality of Switzerland. Smart, right? According to the writer, Derek Kolstad, the idea was based on a noirish films where even the biggest enemies from different states would get together for a drink when they entered Switzerland. That's the idea that played out here too, which is pretty cool. Even the operators in the film are based on the Suicide Girls from the early 2000s to give the hotel a proper vintage feel. And speaking of vintage, John Wick itself is inspired by a lot of classic action movies, like The Killer. Now, this one's probably the closest film there is to this franchise. In The Killer, the hitman, Ah Jong, wants to end his career in the criminal arts, but decides to take one last job that has him fighting for his life. Sounds very familiar to our Keanu version, doesn't it? But it isn't The Killer that's the biggest inspiration as much as it's John Woo, the creator whose use of sympathetic yet merciless killers has been seen across his films. Guess we have one more guy to thank for giving the world inspiration enough to create John Wick. But Woo isn't the only one. Another film franchise that's inspired by the Wickverse is Game of Death. Remember Bruce Lee and Kareem's fight in the Game of Death? The size difference between the two was a major pull for fans and gave us all a nail-biting sequence. I don't think I'm over it. The same was followed in John Wick when Keanu took over Boban Marjanovic, the almost 7.5-foot NBA superstar whose size was definitely an advantage for him there. But hey, no matter how huge a guy you are, you can't top John Wick. He's absolutely unmatchable. And there's one more movie reference that proves that, which is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. From Blondie's chaotic character to Tuco's revolver scene, John Wick picks a lot of references from this classic too. Like in The Good, the Bad, Blondie's brought to the audience without any introduction. We don't know how he entered into the life of crime, why he's the way he is, and how he trained to become a professional mercenary. The same is the case with Wick, who is just there. You don't know about his past, and you better not ask him about it either. Another reference is when he builds himself a revolver, which is a classic remake of Tuco doing the same in the former movie, down to the Chambers click. Isn't that the old world charm that got us loving his character though? Of course it is. If only some other action films also did their research before churning out film after film of mediocre quality. But until they get to that, at least we have John Wick to binge. And on that note, here's me signing off. See you in the next video.